On a calm evening in Beverly Hills, Keanu Reeves stepped into Lumiere, an upscale restaurant known for its elegance and exclusivity. The establishment, a beacon of sophistication, regularly hosted the city's elite, celebrities, business tycoons, and anyone looking to make a statement of wealth and status. Everything about Lumiere, from its grand chandeliers to its meticulously set tables, spoke of luxury. Keanu, however, arrived in stark contrast to the usual clientele. He walked in wearing a plain pair of jeans, a simple shirt, and a jacket that had clearly seen better days. There was no pretense in his demeanor, no entourage trailing behind him, and no flashy accessories to hint at his fame. Instead, he carried himself with a quiet humility, blending into the background even in a room designed to showcase extravagance. Ashley, a waitress at the restaurant, noticed him the moment he walked through the door. Ashley was proud of her position at Lumiere, a restaurant where she could brush shoulders with celebrities and influential figures. To her, working there wasn't just a job, it was a badge of honor, proof that she belonged in the orbit of the wealthy and powerful. However, Ashley had developed a habit of judging people at first glance, often measuring their worth by the clothes they wore or the aura they projected. When her eyes landed on Keanu's modest outfit, her opinion was formed in an instant. She didn't recognize him, nor did she pause to consider why he might be dressed the way he was. To her, he simply didn't fit the image of the elite patrons Lumiere was known for. Without hesitation, she categorized him as someone out of place, someone who didn't belong in a space as exclusive as this. Her judgment quickly turned into action, with a forced smile that barely concealed her disdain. Ashley greeted Keanu and asked curtly, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Her tone carried a hint of sarcasm, as if she expected him to suddenly realize his mistake and leave. Keanu, unbothered, nodded politely and asked for a table. Ashley sighed dramatically, her frustration barely veiled. She led him to the worst table in the restaurant, a small spot tucked away near the kitchen doors. The dim lighting and constant clatter of dishes made it the least desirable seat in the house. It was a table often reserved for walk-ins or customers who were perceived as not worth impressing. As she handed him the menu, Ashley leaned in slightly and said, "Just so you know, the prices here are quite high." Her words dripped with condescension, a thinly veiled attempt to discourage him from staying. Keanu simply smiled and thanked her, his demeanor calm and collected, as if her words hadn't been meant to belittle him. Throughout the evening, Ashley continued to treat him poorly. She deliberately took longer to take his order, prioritizing other tables with more deserving customers. When she finally approached, her tone was sharp, and her body language exuded impatience. She made a show of highlighting the most expensive items on the menu, as though expecting him to balk at the prices or reconsider his decision to dine there. "Are you sure about that?" she asked when he placed his order for a high-end dish. "Yes," Keanu replied with a gentle smile. "That sounds perfect." Her behavior didn't go unnoticed. Some of the other patrons glanced over, their brows furrowing at the disparity in how she treated him versus the other guests. One elderly gentleman seated nearby watched the interaction closely. He was particularly struck by Keanu's composed response to her rude behavior. While many would have reacted with anger or frustration, Keanu remained calm and courteous, his quiet confidence speaking volumes. As the evening progressed, Keanu continued to exude patience, even when Ashley rolled her eyes at his requests or made dismissive remarks. He never once raised his voice or allowed her attitude to disturb him. Instead, he treated her with the same respect he had shown from the moment he walked in. To those observing, it became clear that Keanu's demeanor wasn't just about politeness. It was a reflection of who he was as a person. The pivotal moment came when the restaurant manager stepped into the dining area, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. He was scanning the room when his eyes fell on Keanu. His reaction was immediate and unmistakable. He rushed over, his face lighting up with recognition. "Mr. Reeves," he exclaimed, his tone filled with warmth and respect. Ashley froze mid-step, the tray in her hands nearly slipping as she turned to look. The shock on her face was undeniable. The man she had dismissed and disrespected all evening wasn't just another customer. He was one of the restaurant's owners, The murmur of conversations in the dining room quieted as patrons began to take notice. The manager, now standing beside Keanu's table, extended his hand in greeting. "It's such an honor to have you here, sir," he said, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Thank you for joining us tonight." Keanu smiled warmly, shaking the manager's hand. "Thank you. It's good to be here," he replied, his tone as humble as ever. Ashley's face turned bright red. She quickly stepped back, her earlier smugness replaced with visible embarrassment. The realization of who Keanu was and how poorly she had treated him hit her like a wave. She fumbled with her tray, unsure whether to apologize or quietly disappear. Keanu, noticing her discomfort, addressed the situation with the same grace he had shown all evening. Turning to Ashley, he said, "It's okay. We all make mistakes." His voice was calm, but there was a depth of sincerity in his words. What's important is learning from them. The manager, sensing the tension, began to reprimand Ashley, but Keanu gently interrupted. "No need," he said. "Let this be a teaching moment. We're all here to make this restaurant a welcoming place for everyone." Ashley nodded, her eyes welling with tears as she whispered, "I'm sorry." Keanu gave her a kind smile. "Apology accepted. Just remember, kindness goes a long way." After the evening came to a close, Keanu stayed behind to address the staff. Standing in the center of the empty dining room, he spoke with humility and purpose. "This restaurant isn't just about good food and a fancy atmosphere," he said. "It's about making people feel welcome, no matter who they are or what they look like. That's what really matters." His words left a lasting impression. Ashley, in particular, walked away with a renewed perspective. She promised herself to approach every customer with respect and compassion, regardless of her initial impressions. The story of that night became a powerful reminder of the importance of humility, kindness, and treating everyone with dignity. Keanu's ability to turn a difficult situation into a meaningful lesson inspired not just the staff at Lumiere, but also the many who heard about his actions. And in the end, his message resonated deeply. True character is revealed not by how we treat those we admire, but by how we treat those we underestimate. As Keanu stepped through the grand doors of Lumiere, the soft glow of chandeliers and the faint murmur of conversation enveloped the room. The restaurant exuded luxury, with polished floors, crisp white tablecloths, and an air of exclusivity. Patrons, dressed in designer suits and elegant evening gowns, sipped fine wine and dined on gourmet dishes. But Keanu, in his simple jeans, plain shirt, and well-worn jacket, stood apart. He approached the hostess stand with quiet confidence and asked for a table. Ashley, a waitress stationed nearby, immediately took notice. Her trained eyes scanned him up and down, lingering on the frayed edges of his jacket and the scuffed toes of his shoes. To her, appearances mattered most in a place like this, and Keanu's casual attire clashed with the polished atmosphere she prided herself on maintaining. She approached him, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and greeted him with a forced smile. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" she asked, her tone dripping with thinly veiled sarcasm. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if challenging him to admit he didn't belong. Keanu, unbothered, offered a polite smile. "Yes, I'd like a table, please," he replied, his tone calm and steady. Ashley sighed audibly, as though granting him a seat was a monumental inconvenience. With a dramatic gesture, she grabbed a menu and motioned for him to follow her, rather than leading him to one of the prime tables in the center of the dining room, where other patrons enjoyed the ambience and view. She escorted him to the farthest corner of the restaurant. The table was cramped and dimly lit, situated next to the kitchen door. Every few moments, waitstaff rushed past with trays, and the clatter of dishes and the hum of kitchen activity drowned out the soft music playing in the background. "This should work for you," she said curtly, dropping the menu onto the table with little regard. Her tone made it clear she believed he was out of place, and she was in no rush to make him feel welcome. "Thank you," Keanu said softly, his voice unwaveringly polite. He pulled out the chair and sat down without complaint, glancing briefly at the menu before setting it aside. Ashley hovered nearby, watching him with barely concealed disdain. When she finally returned to take his order, her demeanor hadn't softened. Instead, she leaned over the table, pointing at the menu with a condescending smirk. "Just so you know," she said, her voice dripping with superiority, "our prices are quite high here. I wouldn't want you to be caught off guard." Keanu met her gaze, his expression calm. "That's fine," he said simply. "I'll have the chef's special, please." Her eyebrows shot up. The chef's special was one of the most expensive items on the menu, a fact she seemed eager to remind him of. "The special? Are you sure?" she asked, her voice tinged with mock concern. "It's one of our priciest dishes." Keanu nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I'm sure. Thank you." Her lips pressed into a thin line as she jotted down his order, clearly irritated by his composure. She walked away, muttering under her breath. Throughout the evening, Ashley's behavior only grew more dismissive. She deliberately took longer to bring his food than she did for other customers, frequently attending to tables nearby while ignoring him. When she finally returned with his meal, she placed the plate in front of him with a lack of care, nearly spilling the sauce onto the table. Keanu, however, remained unfazed. He thanked her politely each time, his calm demeanor never wavering. His quiet patience began to draw the attention of nearby diners. An older gentleman seated at a nearby table had been observing the interactions for some time. He leaned over and whispered to his dining companion, nodding toward Keanu. "Look at how he handles himself," he said. "Doesn't seem to let anything bother him." Despite Ashley's efforts to make him feel unwelcome, Keanu enjoyed his meal in peace. He savored each bite, taking in the flavors with quiet appreciation. Occasionally, he glanced around the restaurant, observing the other diners with genuine curiosity. There was no bitterness in his gaze, no trace of anger or frustration over how he was being treated. Instead, he carried himself with the same quiet dignity he had when he first walked in. When it came time to pay, Ashley approached the table with what she thought was a triumphant smirk. She placed the check in front of him, ensuring the total was visible. "Here you go," she said, her voice tinged with mock sweetness. "Take your time." Keanu didn't hesitate. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and handed her a credit card. As she walked away to process the payment, she threw a glance over her shoulder, as if expecting him to struggle with the bill. But when she returned, the receipt was signed, and he handed it back with a smile. "Thank you," he said again, his tone as kind as it had been all evening. As Ashley cleared the table, the restaurant manager emerged from the back and began scanning the dining room. His eyes landed on Keanu, and his expression instantly brightened. He strode quickly toward the table, his demeanor shifting to one of utmost respect. "Mr. Reeves," the manager exclaimed, his voice full of enthusiasm. "What a pleasure to see you here." Ashley froze, the tray slipping slightly in her hands. She turned to the manager, her face pale with shock. "Mr. Reeves," she echoed softly. The manager smiled warmly at Keanu. "Thank you for visiting us tonight. It's always an honor to have one of our owners dine with us." The words hit Ashley like a tidal wave. Her breath caught, and her eyes darted between Keanu and the manager. The realization sank in. She had been rude, dismissive, and condescending to not just any customer, but one of the restaurant's owners. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and she took an awkward step back, unsure of what to say. Keanu, noticing her discomfort, turned to her with a kind smile. "It's okay," he said gently. "We all make mistakes." Ashley stammered an apology, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't realize. I'm so sorry." Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's not about who someone is or what they're wearing," he said softly. "Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect." The lesson, spoken with such calm conviction, resonated deeply, not just with Ashley, but with everyone who had witnessed the evening unfold. Keanu's words, paired with his actions, left a lasting impression, reminding everyone in the room of the profound power of humility and grace. Keanu, unfazed by the dismissive treatment he was receiving, maintained his composure with a grace that only highlighted his character. Instead of reacting to Ashley's snide remarks or condescending attitude, He responded with quiet politeness, as though her words hadn't been meant to belittle him. When she rolled her eyes at his order and emphasized the high cost of the meal, he merely nodded and thanked her, his voice calm and sincere. It was clear that he wasn't there to cause a scene or prove a point. He was simply there to enjoy his meal. Nearby, an elderly gentleman observed the exchange, his sharp eyes catching every detail of the interaction. While most diners were absorbed in their conversations, this man couldn't help but be drawn to the quiet strength Keanu displayed. The way he carried himself, with dignity and patience, even in the face of blatant disrespect, left the man both curious and impressed. He whispered to his dining companion, "Now that's a man with character. Doesn't let anything rattle him." The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted slightly when the manager walked into the dining area, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. He moved with the kind of purpose that signaled his authority. His gaze swept across the room, taking in the bustling activity of the waitstaff and the elegant diners. But when his eyes landed on Keanu, his entire demeanor changed. Recognition flickered in his expression, followed by a mix of surprise and urgency. He immediately crossed the room, weaving through the tables with a sense of purpose that caught the attention of those nearby. As he approached, his voice rang out, clear and full of respect. "Mr. Reeves," he exclaimed, a broad smile spreading across his face. His tone carried both admiration and enthusiasm, and the way he addressed Keanu made it impossible for anyone not to take notice. Conversations around the room hushed as diners turned their heads, curious about what was happening. Ashley, who had been returning to Keanu's table with the receipt, froze mid-step. Her eyes widened in confusion, and her grip on the tray faltered. The name the manager had just spoken, Mr. Reeves, sounded familiar, but the realization of who her customer truly was hadn't fully sunk in yet. She glanced between Keanu and the manager, her earlier confidence replaced with uncertainty. The manager reached Keanu's table, extending a hand eagerly. "It's such an honor to have you here," he said warmly, shaking Keanu's hand with both of his own. "Thank you for stopping by tonight." Keanu offered a small, gracious smile. "Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here," he replied, his tone as humble as it was genuine. He gestured briefly to the meal in front of him. "The chef's special is excellent." Ashley stood frozen a few feet away, the color draining from her face as realization finally dawned on her. The man she had dismissed and treated poorly wasn't just another customer. He wasn't some outsider who didn't belong in the restaurant's opulent setting. He was one of the owners of Lumiere, a fact that now seemed glaringly obvious to everyone except her. A wave of murmurs rippled through the dining room as patrons pieced together what was happening. The once dismissive attitude of the staff had transformed into an air of deference, and Ashley's behavior throughout the evening became an unspoken question hanging in the air. Her cheeks flushed crimson as she realized the enormity of her mistake. For a moment, she stood rooted to the spot, unsure whether to approach the table or quietly retreat. The manager's warm words continued, oblivious to Ashley's discomfort. "Your presence always means a lot to us," he said, gesturing to the room around them. "If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to ask." Keanu, ever composed, nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, but everything has been fine," he said, his voice carrying the same calm tone he'd maintained all evening. "Though I do think there's an opportunity for a teaching moment." The manager frowned slightly, his attention finally shifting to Ashley, who stood awkwardly nearby, clutching the tray as if it were a lifeline. Her earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced with a mix of panic and remorse. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Keanu turned to her, his expression kind but firm. "It's important," he began, his voice steady, "to treat every customer with respect, no matter who they are or what they look like. You never know what someone might be going through or who they might be." His words weren't harsh, but they carried a weight that made them impossible to ignore. This restaurant isn't just about luxury or exclusivity. It's about creating an experience where everyone feels welcome. Ashley's face burned with shame. She lowered her gaze, her earlier bravado completely shattered. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to. I didn't realize." Keanu nodded, his expression softening slightly. "We all make mistakes," he said gently. "What matters is that we learn from them." The manager, now aware of the situation, quickly apologized on behalf of the staff. "I assure you, Mr. Reeves, this is not how we operate," he said, casting a pointed glance at Ashley. "It won't happen again." Keanu held up a hand to stop him. "It's okay," he said. "This isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about remembering why we do what we do. Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can make a world of difference." The simplicity of his words struck a chord, not just with Ashley, but with everyone within earshot. The dining room, which had fallen silent during the exchange, buzzed softly with admiration. It wasn't just his fame that commanded respect, it was his humility, his ability to turn a moment of conflict into a lesson on compassion. As the manager thanked Keanu again and excused himself to attend to other matters, Ashley remained by the table, still visibly shaken. Keanu glanced at her one last time, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "You'll do better next time," he said. "I'm sure of it." Ashley nodded quickly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I will," she promised, her voice filled with genuine resolve. The remainder of the evening carried on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Keanu's words lingered in the air, a gentle reminder of the power of humility and the importance of kindness. And though Ashley's embarrassment had been palpable, it was clear that the lesson she learned that night would stay with her long after the doors of Lumiere closed. A hush fell over the dining room as a ripple of realization swept through the crowd. Murmurs of disbelief and curiosity spread like wildfire among the patrons, each whisper carrying fragments of what they'd just witnessed. Ashley's face drained of color, her confident demeanor crumbling into one of panic and mortification. She instinctively took a step back, her earlier arrogance replaced by visible unease. Keanu Reeves, however, didn't flinch. His calm expression remained steady, unshaken by the murmurs or Ashley's discomfort. He didn't lash out, nor did he demand an apology in a way that would humiliate her further. Instead, he seized the moment with the quiet authority of someone who understood the value of compassion over confrontation. Keanu turned to Ashley, his voice steady and filled with sincerity. "It doesn't matter who someone is or what they're wearing," he began, his words cutting through the tension in the room. "Everyone deserves respect. No one should feel unwelcome because of how they look or what assumptions we might make about them." There was no anger in his tone, only a sense of understanding that made the message resonate deeply. His words didn't carry condemnation, but instead held an invitation to reflect and grow. This restaurant isn't just for people who dress a certain way or fit a certain image. Keanu continued, his gaze unwavering. It's meant to be a space where everyone feels welcome, regardless of where they come from or what their story might be. Ashley's face flushed with embarrassment as her gaze dropped to the floor. Her hands fidgeted nervously at her sides, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu acknowledged her apology with a small nod, offering her a kind but measured smile. "We all make mistakes," he said gently. "What matters is that we take those moments and turn them into lessons." Rather than linger on Ashley's misstep, Keanu turned his attention to the entire restaurant staff once the night had ended and the last customer had left. Standing in the center of the dining area, surrounded by the remnants of a busy evening, he addressed the team with the same humility that had defined his actions all night. "Tonight is a reminder," he began, his voice carrying a warmth that made every person in the room lean in to listen. "It's a reminder that we don't always know what someone's going through when they walk through these doors. They might be carrying burdens we can't see. That's why kindness matters so much. It's not just about providing good service, it's about offering people a moment of comfort, a place where they feel they belong." His words were simple but deeply impactful, the kind that lingered long after they were spoken. He didn't single anyone out, nor did he dwell on the earlier incident. Instead, he framed the conversation around growth and understanding, using the moment to inspire rather than reprimand. "We're human," he continued, his gaze moving from one staff member to the next. "And being human means we're going to get things wrong sometimes. What defines us isn't the mistakes we make, it's how we choose to grow from them. Treating people with kindness and respect isn't just good for them, It's good for us too. It makes this place more than just a restaurant. It makes it a community." The sincerity in his voice touched everyone in the room. Even those who hadn't been directly involved in the evening's events found themselves reflecting on his words. Ashley, standing quietly near the back of the group, felt tears prick her eyes. She had never expected someone of Keanu's stature to respond with such grace and humility. His ability to turn her embarrassing behavior into a meaningful lesson left her both humbled and determined to do better. As Keanu finished speaking, the room was filled with a sense of quiet reverence. He looked around at the staff, his expression softening. "I know you all work hard to make this place special," he said, his tone encouraging. "And I hope you'll take what happened tonight as a chance to remember why we do what we do. It's not just about the food or the ambience, it's about the people who walk through those doors." The staff nodded, their expressions thoughtful. The weight of his words had sunk in, and the atmosphere in the room had shifted. What had started as a difficult and uncomfortable situation had become an opportunity for growth, thanks to Keanu's ability to lead with empathy. After the meeting, Ashley approached Keanu hesitantly, her cheeks still flushed with embarrassment. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly as she said, "Thank you for tonight. I realize now how wrong I was, and I'm going to do better." Keanu smiled warmly, his eyes kind. "I believe you," he said simply. "Just remember, it's the little choices we make every day that show who we really are." Ashley nodded, his words resonating deeply. She promised herself that from that moment on, she would treat every customer with the respect and kindness they deserved, regardless of her first impressions. As Keanu prepared to leave, the restaurant staff watched him with a newfound respect, not because of his fame or his ownership of the establishment, but because of the way he had handled the situation with such humility and grace. He hadn't just spoken about kindness, he had embodied it, turning what could have been a moment of conflict into an enduring lesson. The story of that night quickly spread, shared by patrons who had witnessed the events and later by the staff themselves. It became more than just an anecdote about a celebrity encounter. It became a story about the power of compassion and the importance of treating every person with dignity. Keanu's actions left a lasting impression, not just on those who were there that evening, but on everyone who heard the tale. His message was clear and timeless. True character isn't about power or prestige, it's about how we treat others, especially those we might be tempted to overlook. And in a world that is often judged by appearances, Keanu's reminder to choose kindness resonated deeply, inspiring others to do the same. Keanu's words lingered in the air, carrying a weight that resonated with everyone in the room. For Ashley, the impact was deeply personal. Though her cheeks were still flushed with embarrassment, her heart was filled with gratitude. She had braced herself for anger, for harsh words that would solidify the sting of her earlier actions. But instead, she was met with grace. "I'm so sorry," Ashley said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. Her gaze remained lowered as she spoke, a mix of humility and regret in her tone. "I judged you unfairly, and that was wrong. I've learned my lesson, and I promise I'll do better." Keanu met her apology with a warm, understanding smile, his eyes filled with genuine compassion. "We all make mistakes," he said gently. "The important thing is what we do next. Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it has the power to change everything." His words were simple yet profound, and the sincerity in his voice made them unforgettable. Ashley felt the truth of them settle in her heart, and for the first time that evening, she didn't feel small or humiliated. She felt inspired to change. But the story didn't end at that moment. Word of what had transpired at Lumiere began to spread beyond the elegant dining room. Patrons who had witnessed Keanu's humility and Ashley's transformation carried the story with them, sharing it with friends, family, and eventually, the world. It became more than a tale of a celebrity encounter. It became a testament to how grace under pressure and simple acts of respect could have a ripple effect far greater than anyone might anticipate. Ashley took the experience to heart, transforming not just her work approach, but how she viewed people. She stopped making snap judgments and began treating every customer with genuine kindness and attention. Her shift in attitude was contagious. Regular diners noticed her warmth, and her colleagues followed her lead, creating a more inclusive atmosphere at Lumiere. For Keanu, that evening wasn't about making a statement, it was simply a reflection of his character. He handled the situation with quiet strength and empathy, showing that true leadership is about treating others with respect, no matter their status. His simple words, "Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can change everything," resonated deeply, inspiring everyone who witnessed or heard the story. The tale of that night spread beyond the restaurant's walls, reminding people of the profound impact of small, intentional acts of compassion. Ashley's transformation became a powerful example of growth, showing that even moments of discomfort can lead to positive change. Lumiere itself became a symbol of warmth and respect, setting a new standard for hospitality. Keanu's actions, understated but profound, inspired countless others to lead with kindness in their own lives. It was a simple yet enduring lesson. In a world full of choices, choosing kindness has the power to transform everything.